Good muddy rainy afternoon to you. This is Angela with Permaculture, hanging out in my front yard this afternoon. Have a pot of homemade pasta sauce going on the stove and a loaf of bread rising, and my kids are playing Uno, and I thought it would be a good time to come out here and work on some yard chores. So I'm in my front yard in the smallest section of our permaculture food forest. You can see a pawpaw here, goji berry, wolfberry, honeyberry. Behind it is a blueberry, another blueberry, triple crown blackberries against my neighbor's arborvitae, peach, bush cherry behind it, tons and tons and tons of plants up here. Not to mention all of the dormant herbaceous perennials. Here you can see some of my perennial leeks because we've been having a mild winter. So what I'm working on this afternoon is I've been pruning my fruit trees because we've had kind of an unusually dry winter, and it's good to prune stone fruit when the weather is dry. If you prune it in wet weather, you can create open wounds that allow bacterial canker to set in, and that is more easily transmitted in wet weather. So my plum trees here and my peach tree and plum tree right here next to me and more in the backyard, I've been pruning during dry weather. And then also these are prunings from one of my quince trees, which is right near my property line, and I have to keep pruning it to keep it from overhanging into the neighbor's driveway. So I thought I would talk about the permaculture principle of produce no waste and why that principle is important. So if you are familiar with the 12 principles of permaculture, they are all design elements that help guide your garden design, and each of them works in concert with the other to create a regenerative system. So produce no waste is sort of, I've talked about it before, it's sort of aspirational for a lot of people. It's really difficult in Western society to produce no waste whatsoever, but that's our goal because we can't throw things away. There is no away. It's just making it a problem for other people in other parts of the world or for future generations, and I don't feel good about that. But also produce no waste has this other element of how can we see everything as a resource? If we are resource minded and abundance minded, how can we view things we normally see as trash or an annoyance and turn them into something that helps us? So for me, that's what to do with my tree prunings. They can pile up. I can take them and put them in my yard waste bin. We do have municipal compost here. But I want to try and utilize every part of them so that everything stays on site in my system. So here's how I do it. It may seem like a no-brainer. You can chip it up and use it as wood chips, which I get wood chips delivered. I don't own a wood chipper, and they are abundant in an urban community with power line trimming and people getting tree trimming done. Easy to get free wood chips here. And I don't own a wood chipper. I wouldn't have a place to store one. So what I do is I try and utilize every part of my tree prunings as best I can. So what I do is I pile up my prunings here, and I have another pile in the backyard. And the first thing I do is I take and I prune off all of these small pieces here, okay? And they go into this bucket. And I really like using these small twigs for stakes in the garden for basically what's called pea brush. I grow a couple of low varieties of peas that I like to keep off the ground, and they get about 18 to 22 inches tall, and you stick a bunch of these little stakes in the ground and then you plant your peas around them, and they help hold up the peas. Now I also prune my hazel in the backyard for longer stakes for my like alderman peas, my taller peas. But this collection of fruit tree, kind of like the delicate ends of the fruit tree prunings, works really well for pea brush. You just stick them all in the ground. So I want to save all those. So once I prune off all of those little delicate pieces on the ends, I stack them and move them into the next pile, okay? And this pile, we're looking at pieces that are as big around as my index finger all the way to, if I'm pruning larger pieces, sometimes they're as big around as my calf, right? And these I'm going to use for firewood. And as you can see, if the pieces are really large, I use my chainsaw, but if they're small, I just use my hand pruner and my secateurs, and I cut them up and they go in a bucket. And if you've seen some of my videos showing the backyard, I have a rack right out my back door that's specifically for kindling. And I feel like this is the most efficient way to produce no waste, and also to follow the permaculture principle of obtain a yield. So quince wood is very hard wood and it burns very hot. Apple wood, plum wood, hazel, all burn real hot, and they're real nice to put into your wood stove or your rocket stove. They burn great. Also, when you get these pieces that have all these little side bits on them, they ignite easily. So these are really nice to get your fire going. They work well as kindling. These small pieces have a lot of surface area. They get real dry. They catch easily. So for me, I feel like that's a much better use than to chip them up and use them as wood chips. I have given some of my pieces of apricot wood and apple wood to my father, who does woodworking projects. That's another use for the larger pieces, but in general, I make it into firewood. So that goes on my rack out back, and you would be surprised, we get probably about 4 weeks worth of firewood every year, and I run the wood stove every day in the winter, sometimes all day. We get about 4 weeks worth of firewood just from pruning my fruit trees. That's not importing any wood from Craigslist. That's just off the property. And I feel really good about that, considering we only have a 1/4 acre. And I do have more than 40 fruit trees, but not all of them make great firewood. Like mulberry tends to burn not super hot, and I can't burn my fig wood. I have a fig allergy and allergy to Ficin, and so I don't feel comfortable burning any of that wood and aerosolizing any of the remaining Ficin in the wood. So I don't use it, even though a lot of people use fig for smoking food. I don't personally. But I feel like for me, that's really a smart use of my resources. I'm taking something that otherwise is kind of an annoyance, piles of prunings. I'm getting a little bit of cardio out of it. I'm getting a little bit of, an upper arm workout out of it, using my hand tools to cut it all up. But I'm also getting stakes for the garden in the form of pea brush, and I'm getting an abundance of firewood. Like I said, about 4 weeks of firewood for our family every year. Mostly because those fruit woods burn nice and hot and they're real hard. So that's just a little look at what I'm doing out here this afternoon. I'm gonna go back and try and get some more of this done before it turns rainier or before it gets dark. And I hope y'all are staying safe. Hope you are starting to look forward to the springtime as the days are getting a little longer. I can stay out till after 5 now doing yard work because there's still daylight. So I hope y'all are as excited as I am about the return of the sun. And I will be back soon with more about permaculture gardening and sustainable living. Thanks.